But you are pro like drug liberation. You're pro guns. I suggest like you're pro like every individual for themselves. Why are you so like patriotic in the sense of country? Why do you see like, oh, this is our land? The fucking Muslims. It's we versus them.
Talking with famous people.
You relate to like the individual aspect, like very, but you still have this sort of like it's we versus them. You still don't get like humanity is sort of like united in a fucking planet in the middle of the fucking world, in the middle of fucking universe that doesn't matter. You're preaching being on an individual level, but it neglects everything about fucking society. But at the same time, you're going on like, oh, it's our society versus their society.
Okay, no, I'm not saying it's our society versus their society. As I've said many times, I've said it's pre-enlightenment thinking versus post-enlightenment thinking. And those individual human beings are sufficiently high correlatives with pre-enlightenment thinking that I don't want to admit them. To the extent that there are borders, and there is national sovereignty, then I think that the border should be used to enforce, to prevent pre-enlightenment thinking from entering the country. I've already said there's a test they can prove they're not subject to it, in which case they can come in. All they got to do is deface the Quran and shit like that.
But I think you're any fucking speaks too fast for yourself to fucking comprehend what you're saying right now. Going on like, oh, the individual. Well, if people hurt themselves, it's not my problem.
Just because they feel contradictory doesn't mean they are. You have failed to establish a contradiction.
You still didn't answer my question.
What question?
My question is, how can you preach for individual rights where it's still like doing a differentiation between...
I just answered the question. I said you failed to establish a contradiction. You just point out they seem contradictory. Which of my arguments is in contradiction to the assertion that we should not allow Muslims into the country?
The religious aspect, just put it away.
Okay.
Just why aren't we like one entire fucking nation? Just, okay, there's no religion. Religion doesn't exist. But you're saying like it's an individual level, but sort of you're going on like it's them versus us, sort of.
I favor loose borders for civilized people. And
what do you define as a civilized person? Is it like Western world?
I told you it's a clear distinction between pre-enlightenment thinking and post-enlightenment thinking. If you're not capable of post-enlightenment thinking, if you can't distinguish between symbol and reality, then you do not belong in the country. It's very simple, and there's a test we can administer.
For fuck's sake, Eric, I've already told you, fucking discourage religion in this discussion. It has nothing to do with how you fucking...
I favor open borders. I'm not opposed to open borders, and I'm not opposed to immigration. I think Muslims pose a unique problem that needs to be dealt with in a unique fashion. In general, I favor border openness.
Irrelevant. I wasn't talking about religion, but you say you favor open borders. Open borders. That was relevant. So you want open borders, but you want everybody to think for themselves. You want everybody to just be egoistical and care for themselves.
I don't want things for other people. You do.
This is what you've been saying the entire time, Eric. This is your fucking utopia. You want fucking anarchy and fucking stand for it.
You're making the wrong framing. What I'm saying is you presume to know what's best for others.
No, you are the one presuming things here, Eric.
You're just repeating what I said, but saying, no, you did it.
Sort of, because I disagree with it.
Jacob, that's exactly why you keep making all these arguments. It's because you disagree, not because you have any good reasons for it. Okay?
What I'm saying...
The problem is because I'm right, not because I'm argumentative or being unfair or whatever.
You're not right, Eric. You're fucking contradictory. You're contradictory as fuck. Can you just admit you want anarchy?
I don't.
Or how do you want it? You want anarchy. Can you argue against it?
Jacob, you are not asking me any questions. Do you know that? You are not asking me any questions. You want to pin me down on something? Pin me down on something and work off of it. Don't sit there and argue like, I'm frustrated, which is basically all you're saying. Pin me down on something and work off of it. It's how it's done.
You're really good at talking with people. I can see that you're pretty like accustomed to it. Well, there's come some new people, so I'm just gonna play them in the same way you do, Eric.
All right, go ahead. Fair enough. You win that point.
I think you're probably gonna go through some sort of like psychologist or psychiatrist discussion before you can access LSD.
What happens to you if you don't?
You get punished for it.
Are you willing to do the punishment?
Yep, sure.
So you're willing to go up to somebody doing a drug deal in the street with a gun and drag them away and put them in a cage?
Yeah, well, since the person is probably aware of the circumstances, yeah, definitely.
Did you not purchase LSD illegally?
Yes, I did.
Are you saying it would have been better if you were in jail right now?
No, what I'm saying is I am totally aware of the implications of me purchasing LSD. If a cop showed up and basically just point a gun at me and just drop the fucking LSD or whatever and brought me to jail, I would be like, oh well, I had this coming. I'm aware of the punishment.
Do you wish I had been put in jail? Or are you happy to be here?
Oh well, I like speaking with you, so no, I don't want you in jail.
Okay, well, look, the thing is, that's the reality we gotta face, is that people do drugs. You didn't have it coming to you to be subject to violence. You indicate to me, it seems to me that you suffered a lot for your choice that was bad. You seem to care a lot about it. You've already suffered a great deal from the drugs themselves. Why do you need to be additionally punished with violence? I'm making a rule with a threat of violence. From now on, Jacob, Eric says you can't drink alcohol because you make bad arguments when you're drunk. But I'm not going to enforce it with some sort of arbitrary thing. I'm going to go over there with a gun if I see you drinking, and I'm going to put you in a cage for a certain amount of time. Okay? How about that?
You also did one of those viewer things, like, oh, you make bad arguments to make people think like. Oh.
I'm giving you a comparable example of what you're advocating for. What if I told you that? What if it was my rule? Would it be okay?
That's not the point.
Then why is it okay if it's your rule? There somehow is a problem. You're saying, but surely we get to use some violence on this, right? And the answer is no. Because you don't want to be subject to my rule. You're drinking alcohol. I don't drink any alcohol. I drink none. Why? It's a dangerous substance. It's far too dangerous for me to drink. Controlled somehow by whom? Who gets controlled by whom?
Eric, the thing is, I'm concerned for other people. That's what separates you and me.
I believe your concern, and I believe your refusal to convert that concern into actual reasonable positions. For example, I'm asking you, who gets controlled by whom? You say it has to be controlled somehow. Who gets controlled by whom?
Government basically fucking employs psychiatrists to do fucking tests, sort of, or something.
Closing your eyes and saying, nah, this isn't about violence. That's what you're doing. The money the government spends to pay for things stolen in the first place, and then they point guns at you to put you in jail, and they steal more money to pay for the jail. And it's all a big cycle of fucking leechery off the actual people who make you do things in the world.
This is the 5th time you're generalizing my argument. I'm getting pretty tired of this, Eric. You make it seem to the other people that I'm all for a regulation. You're one of those stereotypical pieces.
Your words were it should be controlled somehow. I'm pointing out that you think you can have the position without having any specifics about the control mechanism, and it's okay. As though the control mechanism had nothing to do with the actual advocacy. That's what you're doing, okay? You are denying the fact that we have to include in the impacts of the control mechanism, and you refuse to specify what it is. I ask you, who would be controlled by whom and how?
Because you talk so much, but you make so little sense. What you're saying is basically you're using like strange phrases. You're using an advanced vocabulary just to confuse people. But that's not the point.
Yes.
Because you're still dancing around it.
By whom and how? Who is controlled by whom and how? 7 words.
Government.
2 syllables in it, Jacob.
Government. Psychiatrist. People.
Government controls people with psychiatrists.
Okay, let's make it like this. You may go buy weed, you may go buy alcohol, and you're informed about stuff. You know, you're like, okay, well, not alcohol, but weed. Like, okay, this is the benefits, this is the side effects, this is what can happen.
Is it really the psychiatrist who controls? Because let me ask you a question, Jacob. What happens if I decide, you know what? I'm going to make this easy for people to get instead of hard. So I'm going to ship in from a supplier out of country a big box of acid, and it gets busted. Oh, no, I got busted. I go to jail. That's part of the regulation, right? Or no?
Well, of course you're allowed to sell it. Why don't you start an own company selling that shit?
Okay. So, but my point is, in your worldview, right? People have to go through a psychiatrist. So if I buy it and sell it without the psychiatrist, what happens to me?
Then you get punished, since the persons who you're selling to hasn't gone through a psychiatrist.
Ultimately, I do want it to be illegal because I want to make sure that people go to jail still. I want to make sure that people have guns pointed at them and go to jail.
This has nothing to do with guns and shit.
Okay, but make sure they go get locked in cages.
Your reasoning is like, okay, I sell acid to 5 guys, and both, like, all of them are informed. No, you don't, but that's what you mean.
I mean, I didn't inform them. I said, you guys know what you're doing? Hope, here you go.
That's my point, because you leave it up to the individual. It's up to them how they act, but you don't consider that what they do might affect other people, because you have no consideration about other people.
No,
it's all about
why you want people to point guns at them. That's what I'm concerned about.
Idiot! I'm getting fucking excited right now because you're fucking.
Why must I be subject to violence on your thing that you care about, but not my thing that I care about? There has to be a good reason, right? See, my limiting principle is it's your body. You can do with it as you wish. It's not up to me to interfere with other people's consensual trades and agreements. If I have someone acid to another consenting adult, it's not anybody else's concern.
It hasn't to do with their only their body. It has to do with like mental shift that might affect other people.
People can harm themselves in dramatic ways that affect other people in a lot of different ways, using various things. There are some people who say football should be made illegal because people can break their neck at it, and sometimes they do. Now, the reality is most people who take acid don't end up breaking their neck. Some people do, okay? I've had a couple of really strong acid experiences that were scary as hell, and I don't underestimate the power of it. I advocate against taking it. I would say take mushrooms instead. They're gentler, and they're fun, they're giggly, and I like mushrooms a lot. But I advocate against acid. I advocate against ecstasy as well. I've taken really strong ecstasy before, and it made me twitchy the day after, and made me feel like I was undergoing some sort of physical harm and stuff. I'm not in favor of either of those drugs. What I am saying is that the reason why we have such a fucked up system in America, so many people in jail for doing things, consensual acts, the reason that exists is because of what's happening tonight, where you are saying basically, but you got to understand we have to do something. We as a society have to do something. It's kind of it's a hypothesized outcome or even a real outcome-driven worldview rather than a principled worldview. And as a consequence, it's because you think, well, I'm being black and white. I'm not being black and white. I'm protecting the integrity of the system rather than worrying about the short-term impacts. Because what you don't understand is it sets precedent. It sets precedents that increasingly we get to say what I have to do and what you have to do.
Talking with famous people.
If you have energy to worry about what I'm doing, then you're not using your own life wisely.